Welcome back. I'm Jake Whitwell. Well, I'm still Jake Whitwell with just a new haircut. The host of this show, and you're listening to the Roundup by News of the Week. For those who haven't listened before, the Roundup is News of the Week's compilation of the key stories featured from across the week, read out for more to hear, and it now has video, so you can see me while I'm speaking, which may or may not be better. This episode will include explanation on the news featured, but for further in-depth analysis, you should read around the issue. However, it's a shortened episode because I'm going on holiday and I can't get the weekend in. So it's Monday to Friday from the 26th of August. With that in mind, I'll get on to the news now. On Monday in politics, I picked out 3 stories from the Telegraph. The first detailed warnings by Murdo Fraser and Russell Finlay, saying the Scottish Tories must not lurch to the right and embrace the Farage agenda, as they would be likely to lose more moderate voters than they would gain Reform voters. Murdo's argument was that many Reform voters were disillusioned Tories who could be won back if they showed change. Finlay, who's also a candidate and might be in the Scottish Tory leadership race, agreed the Tories should not chase Reform votes. The second noted business executives have commented that Angela Rayner's Workers' Rights Bill and the watchdog overseeing its enforcement could dump thousands of pounds of unnecessary compliance costs on businesses who are trying to do the right thing. That would harm them, and currently there's no enforcement mechanism for those that aren't doing the right thing, and so it's just saddling cost onto law-abiding businesses. The Telegraph detailed warnings of stifled investment from the boss of Britain's biggest battery storage developer. I'm going to pronounce his name wrong. Stefano Samardozzi, the CEO of Nat Power UK, said investors are stalling and not investing while waiting to see how Reeves's rumoured capital gains tax increase plays out. This comes the company has pledged $10 billion in investment out of the total £500 billion Labour would need to meet their goals with Great British Energy. ITV News reported that Keir Starmer has cancelled the appointment of Gen Jenkins as the UK's National Security Advisor. Jenkins was due to start this summer, but was allowed to and has been allowed to reapply, with a government spokesperson saying all senior appointments will be considered in the usual way. An unnamed official has said this looks like another part of a power grab by Keir Starmer and Sue Gray, commenting the process to appoint Jenkins was run with full transparency and that there was no good reason to do it all over again. I remember at the time reading that the process to hire Jenkins was rushed because it was done in the build up to the election, but I could be wrong there. The Independent reporter Braverman has claimed Starmer is paving the way for tax rises with his speech. She said Starmer has painted a gloomy picture on their inheritance to the Conservatives and will set out draconian tax rises. She also called Labour's accusation of a £20 billion black hole one of the biggest lies in politics right now, instead blaming Labour caving to the trade unions. Sky News covered the US election, with Donald Trump suggesting he may back out of a TV debate with Kamala Harris. He said he did not like ABC's treatment of a Republican senator, and he said that he thought to himself whether it should be done on another network. He also accused Harris's team of trying to change the rules over the issue of hot mics, saying he's still thinking about whether he wants to take part at all. The Times noted Scottish ministers are considering ending subsidies that predominantly benefit middle-class Scots. This would include parts of Scotland's social contract, like free prescriptions, university tuition, bus travel and school meals, and this is due to the £750 million needing to be found before the end of the year, before a further £357 million is added onto their debt or their outstanding balance to satisfy above inflation pay deals. The eye detailed comments from Sarah Alistair Graham, a former chairman of the Committee on the Standards of Public Life, and has said the government has made early, silly mistakes on appointing political allies to the civil service and giving a donor a number 10 pass. Talking on the giving of a temporary pass, he said it's not good business and will be subject to a great deal of public criticism. He also said Labour's returning politics to public service line opens them up to claims of them being hypocritical with stuff like this going on. In miscellaneous news on Monday, the Telegraph reported a cliff collapse in Devon created a huge dust cloud. Seemingly no one was injured, although there were people that ran into the sea to avoid the cliff fall. The Eye covered a poll by the Liberal Democrats which found 1 in 5 Brits who need hospital treatments are not bothering to go to A&E over fears related to waiting times. They instead ignore their doctor's advice. The report found a further 1 in 10 made homemade slings. I spelled that wrong, that's why I was giggling. With 1 in 3 saying then either treated their wounds themselves or prescribed themselves medication. The Lib Dems surveyed 2,200 people across the UK in the making of that survey. In global news, the Evening Standard noted Portugal was hit by a 5.3 magnitude earthquake. It was the strongest to hit the country in 15 years, but there were no reports of injury or damage as of Monday evening. The Times noted IBM closed 2 of its Chinese research divisions, a move projected to affect 1,000 jobs, and one which comes after IBM closed their Beijing-based lab in 2021. This also reflects a wider movement out of China, with some in the tech industry and fearing growing political tension, fears over espionage from the Chinese government, and increasing regulatory scrutiny as reasons to back out of China. And that concludes the news on Monday. On Tuesday, in political news, the Telegraph had 3 stories featured. The first noted the middle classes are bracing for Sir Keir Starmer's capital gains tax raids. In his speech, the Prime Minister talked of those with the broadest shoulders having to pay the most. He talked about a painful budget, and the Tories have said this was his plan all along, and while he has said he will not raise taxes for working people, inadvertently those taxes would cost working people, or could cost working people. Some people work and would still be affected by inheritance tax or capital gains tax, so it's all a little bit of posturing, if you like. The second covered Anthony Seldon's new book called Truss at 10, How Not to Be a Prime Minister, in which it was claimed Truss considered scrapping cancer treatment on the NHS to plug the mini-budget black hole. There was also reports in the book of Truss basically flying off the handle, looking for savings, shouting at everyone about finding savings. And Kwasi Kwarteng has replied saying he was not involved in any conversations like that, while a spokesperson for Truss said it is completely untrue that she considered it, not that conversations took place. Interesting. The third observed the Labour chairwoman's denial of any cabinet splits over the decision to cut winter fuel payments for pensioners, saying the government was forced to take that decision because of the economic mess the Tories left behind. Miss Reeves has also said there weren't any splits and emphasised it was not a policy decision that they wanted to take, but was they're forced into it. She said there aren't any splits on this, so that's pretty clear cut for a politician. The Evening Standard had 2 stories featured. One reported that Keir Starmer has said that his European reset will not mean reversing Brexit after a visit to Berlin. The Prime Minister held talks in Berlin with the German Chancellor and the President, with the 2 countries launching new dialogue for a UK-German treaty to increase business and joint action on illegal migration. The aim is for the deal to be completed in early 2025, with the PM explaining it means a closer relationship on issues like the economy, defence and exchanges, but that there were no plans for a youth mobility scheme. Interestingly, this was at least cautiously backed by some Conservative leadership hopefuls like Robert Jenrick, who said he supported an increased cooperation with allies, only cautioning that this should not come with ceding control, undermining NATO or compromising on Brexit benefits. The second reported on Angela Rayner's comments in the wake of the Dagenham fires. She said nowhere near enough remediation has taken place in the last 7 years since Grenfell, when visiting the site of the fire. She also said that residents had faced a fireball and that it was incredible no one died. Given that this comes 7 years from Grenfell and only a week before the final inquiry from Grenfell is published, it might come as a shock to some people just how little progress has been made. For what it's worth, removal works to the cladding that had begun at the time, but obviously just not before the fire spread. However, Grenfell United, a group representing many of those who were affected by Grenfell fire, said the painfully slow progress of remediation across the country and showed a wider lack of urgency surrounding building safely. BBC News noted Zuckerberg wrote to US House Committee chair saying he regretted bowing to pressure from the Biden administration over COVID. He said some material was taken down under pressure from senior officials, with even some satirical or humorous content being targeted as well. Aside from COVID, Zuckerberg said his firm also briefly demoted content relating to Joe Biden's son ahead of the 2020 general election. I have actually got all of these words written on the page, and I'm still saying them wrong, so that's great. And that was amid warnings of potential Russian disinformation. He was confident if the same choices would not be made today, with Meta now in a position to more robustly push back should a similar situation arise. The White House replied to the pressure during COVID, saying it encouraged responsible actions to protect public health and safety. The Times detailed Labour has axed the Justice scheme, which would see shoplifting offenders do unpaid work in their local communities. The Home Secretary has pulled the plug on the project as she does not believe it offers value for money, while the Home Office blamed the poor state of public finances for the decision. Police leaders have criticised the move, saying the immediate justice scheme would have offered police a more swift and effective new way of punishing low-level offending at the time when the criminal justice system is facing big backlogs. It also seems this might have proved to be an effective deterrent for those who would otherwise decide to commit crime because they know there's something in place to punish them. The Guardian reported that Scottish ministers are largely to blame for the spending crisis in the country, according to the Scottish Fiscal Commission, which is the Scottish financial watchdog. As a comparison to aid your understanding, the SFC has a similar role to the OBR in London. It commented on ministers in Edinburgh and said they had spent heavily on the public sector pay deals without proper planning, and public sector pay accounted for £25 billion of spending last year, which is more than half of the Scottish Government's day-to-day spending. The Scottish Finance Minister, Shona Robinson, has blamed Rachel Reeves, arguing her warning of a £22 billion missing pot of money in the UK budget is basically a warning of immediate cuts to the Scottish subsidy, which Robinson said has created uncertainty about their future funding, which then creates uncertainty around their budgets. In miscellaneous news on Tuesday, there were two stories from The Guardian. One noted there were only 100 prison spaces remaining in men's prisons in England and Wales, and this comes as the prison population has reached its highest level since 2011, standing at 88,234 as of Friday, heading into the bank holiday weekend, which itself is a factor because things are tighter, where people can be sentenced to prison but can't be released from prison over the bank holiday, so it creates a bit of a squeeze anyway. To deal with this, plans are being drawn up to make 500 places available next month, and of course there is the early release scheme kicking into gear soon. The second reported comments from the BMA, which said vapes should be sold behind the counter like cigarettes, and that's to curb the epidemic of vaping. A report from Action on Smoking and Health. 5.6 million adults vape, and there is a rising amount of kids vaping, with 7.6% of 11 to 17-year-olds doing it, which has increased sixfold in a decade. There were two stories from the Evening Standard. One detailed the Home Office has detained 85 illegal workers in a nationwide crackdown in the last week, and 135 businesses were served notices for employing illegal workers. This is part of Labour's work to bust criminal gangs who bring workers to the UK. Yvette Cooper has said we are determined to put a stop to this, and that she will ensure those who break the rules will face the full force of the law. The second reported a man has been charged with felling the sycamore cap tree in court. This comes as the other man involved was excused from the hearing. And in any case, they were jointly charged with £622,000 of damage, and they were also charged with a further £1,444,000 of damage to Hadrian's Wall. The Independent detailed the findings of a report by the Victims Commissioner and found that almost 3 in 4 victims are not confident that reporting a crime will lead to justice. The Victims Commissioner gathered testimonies from more than 3,000 victims in England and Wales and compiled them in a YouGov survey to explore victim decisions and their perception of the criminal justice system. As well as the first stat, 40% of victims whose crime was reported felt dissatisfied with police response. And to make matters worse, this increased to 45% among disabled victims and people from certain ethnic backgrounds and young people. Some other damning stats were that only 22% being recalled offered a chance to provide a victim personal statement, and 38% of victims felt the criminal justice system was fair, but only 27% felt that it was effective. The report by Lady Newlaw, who herself is familiar with the criminal justice system after dealing with her husband's death in 2007, said, "We must end the culture where victims' rights are regarded as optional extras or nice-to-haves instead of a core part of delivering justice." The Victims Minister has said the government will raise confidence in the criminal justice system to its highest ever level, but was very vague on how or when. In global news, Reuters reported North Korea's Kim Jong-un attended the test of an upgraded rocket launcher system, according to state media. In the same week, he oversaw a test of suicide drones and urged researchers to use AI in unmanned vehicles. LBC observed Spanish anti-tourism protesters continually use zebra crossings to stop visitors going onto the beach. The protests had 80 locals, and it was to prevent the high level of tourism in the region's 38 beaches. On Wednesday, in politics, there were two stories from the Times. One reported Rachel Reeves had told Whitehall to make huge cuts before her budget. Several departments are understood to have been told to find more than $1 billion each, with others being told to find hundreds of millions. Ben Zarenko of the IFS said that it's similar to the Conservative measures, but that after years of austerity, there is a load of core functions which it is hard for him to see where savings can come from without affecting those core functions. The second noted Peter Mandelson has distanced himself from the US ambassadorship race. The newish Labour government will have to appoint an ambassador to the US. It was suggested that Mandelson could be appointed to the role should Kamala Harris win the election. He is instead said to be focusing on his campaign to win the chancellorship of Oxford University, and the party will look to appoint a Labour-linked figure should the Democrats win the election, and this is since Labour and the Democrat Party have a bit of a close relationship, amid reports that Labour sent people over to help with the Democrats' campaign last month or earlier this month. I can't actually remember when it was. The Telegraph detailed Yvette Cooper is set to revive the tough anti-protest laws introduced by Suella Braverman. The Home Secretary will try to appeal against the High Court ruling that quashed laws after civil rights group Liberty challenged its legality. The protective laws allow the police to impose restrictions on protests when they were more than a hindrance to everyday lives, and Liberty's challenge rested on the bill being introduced as secondary legislation and therefore being subject to less scrutiny after it was voted down in Parliament. That secondary legislation means it can be forced through by government without the criticism of the Commons, and Liberty didn't like that. The courts also didn't like that, and they found that unlawful. Labour at the time opposed the bill, and this change could come into play next year during the government's pledge review of protest legislation. Liberty has said they're disappointed that the case will be continued and have called the legislation undemocratic, unconstitutional and unacceptable. Newsletter observed comments from Hilary Benn, who said Northern Ireland Troubles victims felt ignored due to the Legacy Act, and Legacy halted all civil service cases that were not in their finding stages, with responsibility for the investigations being transferred to a new truth discovery body. Mr. Benn, the Northern Ireland Secretary, has said that victims and survivors will be central to the government's approach in Northern Ireland, and that Labour has committed to reversing the ban on civil service cases. The Hill reported Trump is leading Harris among independents. The survey conducted by YouGov found that 42% of voters said they plan to vote for Trump in September, while 37% said they would do the same for Harris. It's important to note that the report came amid wider reports of Harris leading Trump in other assessments, i.e. overall, among all voters. It also came just after the conclusion of the DNC and right after RFK Jr. endorsed Trump. The survey was conducted between August 25th and 27th, was among 1,555 people, and had a margin of error of 3.2%. In miscellaneous news, the Evening Standard noted economic growth in Scotland matched the UK's growth in the second quarter, according to GDP figures. Initial figures revealed GDP has grown by 0.6 for the first 3 months of the year, meaning Scotland has enjoyed the same level of growth as the UK in the second quarter. The SNP Economy Secretary said the figures paint a picture of a thriving and resilient economy. And this comes aside from a growing economy. Both governments are struggling with their self-imposed or part self-imposed budget deficits. ITV News detailed SpaceX flights have been halted after a rocket fell over in flames during a landing. No injuries or public damage were reported, but the Federal Aviation Administration has grounded the company's Falcon 9 rockets and has ordered an investigation following the incident. The Independent observed Thames Water says it will hike customer bills by nearly 60% by 2030. Thames Water said it needs to hike customer bills by that much, or as warned, it will become uninvestable. In global news, Reuters reported scientists have said a deadly typhoon named Gami was made worse by climate change. It destroyed infrastructure and left 100 people dead, but it has been suggested that it was made more severe as warmer seas were providing extra fuel for tropical storms, making them more dangerous. The typhoon left more than 300 millimeters of rain in just one day. On Thursday, in politics, there were two stories from Sky News. One covered the possibility of a smoking ban, with Starmer saying 80,000 people losing their lives every year is a huge burden on the NHS and the taxpayer. The move has been welcomed by health campaigners who believe the measure would protect people from second-hand smoking. However, the move has been hailed by a final nail in the coffin by some. Sorry for the shakiness there. Like Nigel Farage or Kate Nichols, the CEO of UK Hospitality, who has said a ban could cause serious economic harm to venues. The move to restrict freedom, allegedly for the benefit of the taxpayer, has been met by criticism from others, with some, like Michael Keel of Nighttime Industries, a company which aims to protect the night out, questioned whether we are becoming a nanny state. The second noted Esther McVie's smoking ban tweet has been labelled as repugnant by a Jewish advocacy group posted a statement on X saying the use of the words which describe the horrors of the Nazis and comparing it to Stalin's proposals was an ill-considered and repugnant action. The tweet itself was the posting of the famous Martin Niemöller poem about German inaction from Nazi persecution. It's quite famous. I remember seeing it in primary school. It talks about the different groups that the Nazis targeted before making the point that actually everyday Germans were also affected. Underneath it, there was a little comment from Esther McVie saying that seems pertinent to Keir Starmer's smoking ban. BBC News had two stories as well. Some would call this ironic, given the concern over freedoms of the smoking ban, but the first detailed Keir Starmer has said the far right is a very real threat. Speaking in Paris, he said the best way to deal with this is through delivery of policy and showing progressive diplomatic alternatives to engaging in far-right populism. The second observed Reeves is under pressure on the winter fuel payments. This comes after the Lib Dem leader, Sir Ed Davey, has called for a Commons vote on the decision to withdraw the winter fuel payments for pensioners, which he described as Labour's first big mistake. This comes amid some Labour MPs voicing their dissatisfaction over the decision, with one calling it a means test, and another saying it looks like Reeves has picked out pensioners. Davey acknowledged that Labour's budget problem is really tough, but said he doesn't think the way to balance the books is by cutting support or by cutting crucial support. Some would say this is easier for Davey to criticise, as he does not make the decisions, so he doesn't get the fallout from them. But he did promise to hold Labour to account over their decision during the election, amid concerns of a supermajority. This is him doing that. He's trying to hold them to account. There were also two stories from The Independent. One continued this episode's coverage of Keir Starmer's smoking ban, with Farage likening smokers to heroes of the nation due to the amount of tax they pay, signalling fears that the tax receipt would decrease and make Labour's economic burden more severe. The second one observed Harris was heckled by a Gaza protester during her Georgia campaign speech. This comes after the Palestinian speakers were denied the opportunity to speak at the DNC, so it could be a reaction from that. I didn't actually get the comments last night. Don't know. Well, maybe I couldn't find them, I'm not sure. The Times detailed staff will be granted the right to demand a 4-day week. The headline from the Times is questionable in its accuracy, as while now employees can request flexible hours like part-time work, a flexible start, or work from home, companies don't have to agree, and under new laws, companies will be legally compelled to agree unless not reasonably feasible. Part of these changes could be compressed hours, which would see employees fill their hours quota in 4 days instead of the usual 5. and that would then create a 4-day week. So that's where the inaccuracy from the Times comes in. This has drew criticism from the Shadow Business Secretary, who said Angela Rayner is pressing ahead with changes despite warnings that said changes will make business in the UK more expensive, and other critics saying flexible working could lead to reduced productivity. They're just playing on that. In miscellaneous news, there were 2 stories featured from The Guardian. One noted Oasis have added more tour dates due to unanticipated demand. The second observed suicide rates in England and Wales have reached their highest since 1999. The suicide rates have been condemned as worse than expected by the charity The Samaritans. They also showed 6,609 recorded in 2023, up from 5,642 in 2022. 3/4 were men, but the female rate has reached its highest since 1994, and this comes as ministers have been urged to treat the issue as a public health crisis. The Evening Standard detailed LNER train drivers have called off their strikes after talks have started. These were separate to pay concerns which are set to be resolved, with offers being tabled and were related to workplace practices. The Times noted a surge in Channel migrants has taken the total migrants for the year to 20,000. This year's total is 3% more at the same point last year than it was at the same point last year, and this comes after criticism of Labour's immigration stance, but also as Labour has claimed its plan is a long-term one, like their gang-busting border security force. Command. I wrote demand, so you can tell I was writing this late at night. In global news, Ukraine's long-range drones are using Western tech to hit Russia, according to the BBC. And The Guardian detailed the UK may unveil tougher emissions targets like the COP28 climate summit. And that concluded the news on Thursday. So just a quick note about this next segment of recording. It's now a few hours later than the last time. Than the last segment, because I've just written the bit of the script for Friday after having worked this evening. So I'm recording this late at night. It's currently early hours of Saturday morning, the day when this episode will be released. If there's any lighting difference, or if I'm speaking differently, maybe it's quieter, it's because I don't want to wake anyone up. And so without further ado, I'll get on to Friday's news. But on Friday, in political news, there were 2 stories from The Independent. In one, Angela Rayner was observed behind DJ Dex at an Ibiza nightclub. After meeting with mayors and housing regulators on Wednesday, from the fires in Dagenham, the deputy PM was filmed singing along to a remix of Somebody I Used to Know. She's previously spoken in public about her love for raving and partying. And it should be noted that Parliament isn't open at the moment, and so Rayner has no obligation to not be partying or in her local constituency, as far as I know, although the convention might be that they still do constituency work. The second cover comments from a leading academic, Nicola McEwen, from the Glasgow University, which poured cold water over the suggestion the Campaign for Scottish Independence was entering a new wave of campaign and support. This comes after a report for support for independence was at 48%, and when those on the fence were removed, the support for independence came out at 51%. It should be noted that in more realistic polls, it was still behind those who wanted to stay in the union, and Miss McEwen went further and said that some of those who back independence will be soft supporters, with their support wavering and it not being a key priority for them. There are also 2 stories featured from the Times. The first detailed that Ash Regan's bill to criminalise paying for sex has been branded a disaster. The bill would make it illegal to buy sex, as well as repealing the offence of soliciting due to criminalising the prostitute. It would also wipe convictions under soliciting from the law, and campaigners have called the bill a disaster for Scottish sex workers. NUM, or National Ugly Mugs, a charity which supports those in sex work, has accused Miss Regan of trying to sneak through the legislation before Holyrood's summer recess, and making it less likely to be viewed, discussed and scrutinised in Holyrood. They've also accused her of failing to notify affected stakeholders like NUM itself, and furthermore, a YouGov poll has found that 47% of Scots supported paying for sex, while only 32% said it wasn't. Said people shouldn't be allowed to pay for sex. Ash Reagan's view on sex work is that it's not a choice, and that women sell sex to survive, and so they have like a constrained choice. That's why she wants to get rid of it. The second observed investigation has found a Labour MP is letting his flats with black mould and ant infestations. Jazz Athwal, the MP for Ilford South, owns 15 flats and is the biggest landlord in the Commons. In one block of 7 flats, nearly half of his tenants spoke of the presence of mould and ants commonly in the flats. Some tenants also allege that they've received threats of eviction if they were to complain. Athwal has said that his flats are managed by an agency, and he was not aware of the problems highlighted. However, he denied that any tenant has been threatened with eviction, clearly showing some understanding of the situation, which is odd if he didn't know about it. Also, he has been previously described as a rental champion, but some have called on the Redbridge Council to investigate him amid those claims of mistreatment. And to make matters worse, the council said Athwal would need a licence to let his 7 properties, or 7 flats, but then the BBC did not find the licence upon investigation on the public licence register, adding to his alleged wrongdoing. There were 2 stories from the Telegraph as well. The first detailed Laura Trott is set to endorse Kemi Badenoch as the new Tory leader. Miss Trott has been tipped as a future Chancellor and is a senior within the Tory Treasury team. The senior Tory politician is set to endorse Badenoch, which comes as Miss Trott, and a spokesperson for Badenoch's campaign has declined to comment. It is expected the endorsement will or will not come the next few days before the first round of voting. The second reported, Labour has insisted a 4-day week could boost productivity. Baroness Smith, the Education Minister, has said that the policy of doing 5 days hours within 4 days could help bring parents back into the workforce, as it would allow parents to spend less on childcare or spend more time with their children outside of work, which is important to some. As already reported in this episode, there have been claims from businesses that the new reforms implemented quick enough will stifle productivity and hurt businesses. So that's a little bit of the backlash on this. Although those comments are new, I haven't heard them before and they seem to make sense. Evening Standard detailed a minister has said that Margaret Thatcher portrait will stay on display in number 10 after backlash. This comes after Keir Starmer asked for it to be removed or moved since it was unsettling, and this has received backlash. A Labour minister has said, I think it might have actually been the Labour Education Minister, but I'm not sure, said that he's too busy focusing on the work of being a Prime Minister, and that's paraphrasing. Obviously shouldn't say it like that. Sky News observed Donald Trump has threatened to imprison Mark Zuckerberg for the rest of his life if he does anything illegal over the election. Mr. Trump expressed concerns over Zuckerberg's action in the 2020 election in his new book called Save America, saying he will watch Zuckerberg closely. Adding to other claims of hypocrisy this week, one of Labour's business advisors had attended a number 10 party, and this was one of the ones slammed by the PM a few days ago in his speech, and Downing Street has surprisingly declined to comment, which is great. In news on the environment, the Times noted raw sewage has been flowing into Windermere for more than a week. A map from United Utilities, which provides a service who provide wastewater services across the northwest, showed that the storm overflows have been releasing untreated sewage since the early morning of August 20. United Utilities has pointed to the Met Office data that said there was a lot of rainfall in the period and that there were numerous flood warnings in the area. Campaigners have said some things that have nothing to do with heavy rain and that they are instead caused by greed, profiteering, financial engineering and regulatory incompetence. In Misk News, there were 2 stories from the Telegraph. One noted an overcrowded boat carrying 60 migrants seconds away from sinking, apparently. It was dangerously overcrowded, obviously, with 60 people in it, and there were children in there hanging on for dear life. If it had sunk, it would have been the biggest tragedy to date in the channel, but luckily it didn't. The second noted bin men are set to vote on strike action after rejecting a pay offer. Union leaders have said 27 local authorities could be affected. 85% of workers rejected the local government employers' pay rise for 2024/2025. it was of 2.5% or £1,290, whichever was higher, and that was a pay rise above inflation. Unite, the union body representing the workers, has said a decade of real terms pay cuts means that workers are now having to vote with their feet and seek employment elsewhere, as some cannot pay their bills. So that 2.5% they allege is less over time because of six consecutive pay cuts. For those who don't know what real terms pay cuts are. BBC News noted Oasis tickets have been relisted for £6,000 minutes after their pre-sale. Independent noted researchers have said child abuse images have been removed from an AI image-generated training source. This comes after researchers found trainers were using some images of child sexual abuse imagery from a database. The non-profit organisation, I think it's Layon, non-profit large-scale AI open network, I think that's what it's actually called, has since worked with a watchdog group and an anti-abuse organisation in Canada and the UK to fix the problem and release a cleaned-up database. The Times reported a study has found cold kills 8 times more than heat in Europe. The report by Lancet Global Health looked at 854 urban areas between 2000 and 2019 and found there were an estimated 363,809 deaths per year from cold compared to an average of 43,729. The study also found global warming will bring a significant increase in the number of deaths related to heat. The Guardian detailed that UK immigration strategy increases the risk of exploitation, according to charities. They have warned perversely that government policy of ramping up raids and deporting and detaining undocumented workers is leading more immigrants to driven underground, increasing their risk of exploitation. This comes after a coordinated letter of more than 80 organisations like Care for Calais, Anti-Slavery International, Doctors of the World and Safe Passage International are calling on the Home Secretary to make it easier for migrants to regularise their immigration status. In global news, Sky News had 2 stories mentioned. Zelensky has sacked the Ukrainian Air Force commander after an F-16 crash. This came amid claims of friendly fire and that the pilot was killed and hit by an American Patriot missile sent by Ukraine. The second detailed social media giant X has been taken down in Brazil over a dispute with Elon Musk. This comes after Musk refused to block certain accounts accused of spreading fake news and hate. ITV News said millions have been told to leave their homes as Japan was hit by a powerful typhoon. Nearly 4,000 people have been told to evacuate after a powerful typhoon made landfall. And this comes as residents were left without power at the start of the storm weakened as of Friday today. I couldn't find in the article anything about victims, damage or deaths, and maybe that's still being calculated, but couldn't find anything. I'll hold my hands up. Sorry. Anyway, that concludes the news for Friday. Thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and now watching. I hope to be making these more regular. I'd love to be able to produce and release them weekly. Hope you can support by liking or subscribing or following wherever you might see this, and give us a little comment for our engagement. We'll reply back to you if you do. Cheers.